This is the same guy that basically said that you're a fraud artist if you're involved in cryptocurrency. It's a little bit like Bill Gates and thinking cloud computing was going to be just an oversight.
Welcome to Tank Talks, a podcast that brings you insights and stories from some of the best and brightest minds in technology and investing. I'm your host, Matt Cohen, founder and managing partner at Ripple Ventures. Now let's jump into the show. Welcome back to the Tank, John. You got a little glow on you today. Was that from staring at the sun a little too long during the eclipse?
Exactly. I was trying to stare through the clouds, so hopefully I didn't damage any of my retina here, but Jesus, that was frustrating.
That was. We were right at pretty much the center of totality here in Toronto, and we got nothing pretty much besides darkness. But if you looked a little south of the city towards the lake, it was much darker down there. And I know a lot of people drove to Niagara and some people drove out of the city, but it was pretty cool that we were in the path of totality.
I was all excited, after watching Three Body Problem, and getting all thinking about the sun and stuff, and then didn't see it. It disappointed me.
Yeah, well, speaking of excitement and totality, let's jump into it. Canada's Liberal government unveiled a $2.4 billion Canadian package designed to boost the country's artificial intelligence sector. And Prime Minister Justin Trudeau made the announcement at Scale AI's offices in Montreal on a Sunday, I believe, to try to make Canada one of the world's leading AI ecosystems and builders here. So just to break it down for our audience, you've got this $2 billion plan to pump money into AI research centers and startups and scale-ups. And it breaks down into a couple different funds, I guess. There's the AI Compute Access Fund. There's the Canadian AI Sovereign Compute Strategy. And then there's a couple other, safety institutes and a bunch of different measures, all broken down in this $2 billion. What's your initial reaction to this? I know you had a little bit of a heads up because you were involved in providing some feedback, but what should the market and what should Canadians think about this bill?
Take it as it is really the dropping of a gauntlet, or the dropping of the glove of saying, we talked about Canada being the starting point or ground zero for AI, with Jeffrey Hinton and Joshua Bengio. And over the last few years, it's feeling like China and the United States have just far surpassed us. It's not really the case yet, but we're seeing the world potentially passing us by on something that, we are responsible for starting, and we need to reclaim that, or at least be in the game. And what this really does, it's really the announcement of saying Canada can only bet on a few things. This is one thing to bet on from the future. So here is the beginning of the bet. Is it too little? Is it the right programs? Let's hope it all goes to Canadians and not to foreigners, and all those sorts of details which have yet to be released. But that's the opportunity for us to help the government shape where this is really the beginning of what we think is going to be Canada's investment into AI.
Well, it's funny, you hear Cohere's co-founder and CEO Aidan Gomez react to the news and say, oh, wow, Canada's playing to win the AI game race, as in it's a shock to hear our name being involved. But we are, one of the creators of some of the greatest technology before, but it's the commercialization piece that I think we want to see where this trickles down to. So
absolutely.
Where are your thoughts here? Let's put on our tinfoil hats, because there are some founders who have participated in these somewhat controversial AI programs of the past. The last one was Scale AI, and there were some founders that came out and said, look, these are great headlines for a lot of founders out there to get excited about, but when you look under the hood, some of the details on how to participate in these programs are pretty handcuffy. For example, you need to have a partnership with some of the larger participants of Canada's economy, Air Canada, Loblaws, Bell, Bombardier. Then you got to be partners with a research institution, and you have to have very structured deliverables and milestones, which we all know startups can't really predict because everything's moving so quickly. So what are your thoughts on how the details will actually trickle down to the startup ecosystem?
Yeah, so this is part of what I really hope to do. Again, the budget's going to be announced next week. The real work is going to start after the budget and all of the details. And I would say that particularly for the AI industry, this is really the feedback that the government really requires. And what we're really trying to do is, the one message that we're sending is, don't try to do this from a bureaucratic perspective, but listen to the folks that are commercializing what and Canadian based. I will say that 1,000 times. It does money leaks to foreign based companies, or it's going to Nvidia or whatever. We've just made the biggest mistake possible. This is not really that different when the one thing that I had said years ago when we were looking at creating all of this AI infrastructure it was the form of people infrastructure. The one thing that we did do that was right is that we dedicated a lot of dollars to whether it was U of T, the Vector Institute, and other, Alberta and Quebec. It did create this class of individuals. The problem was we created this class of extremely well trained individuals that went to work for US largely based companies. And that's where it was the problem. So you're nailing it. It is about the commercialization. It is about if the Canadian government is going to procure AI services, procure them from Canadians and from the startups. These are the good things that they can do. These are the details that we're trying to influence right now. But again, it's not been fully drafted yet, and we'll be there to hopefully help where we can. But I think what we should do, as opposed to complaining about the lack of details, let's just celebrate it when somebody actually gets the direction right, because we haven't had a whole lot of celebrated wins, and I think this was a great direction. And again, hopefully, just the tip of the spear.
100%, the right direction and the right move to make Canada's voice heard in the space. But again, we want to see where this trickles through.
One of my buddies, he's the managing partner of Andreessen Horowitz, Scott Cooper, I think who you know, great guy. And what was his first reaction is, God damn it, Canada, good for you. US, what the hell are we doing? We don't get those very often. Anyways, I just was, let's look at a foreign person's reaction to see what Canada did. And it was very, very positive.
A huge hat tip for sure to the government for putting this plan in place. I guess my question to you is, let's look out 5 years, maybe 10 years from now. What does success look like in your mind? Because from the historical sense, looking at things like Element AI, which were kind of funded consulting projects, if you will, a lot of that maybe just was the wrong timing. I hope now we have the right time for it, which it feels like it does. So what does success look like for you 5-10 years from now from this program?
Yes. So when Element AI, for example, that's what I said at the time, it was too premature. The commercialization was not ready, but the creation of the infrastructure of individuals and human beings who can do it, that's what the goal should have been. However, I believe now the goal needs to be the commercialization, not only of companies, whether they be at the infrastructure, middleware, or in particular, the app layer, where Canada is particularly strong at, given all of the SaaS businesses that we create here. This is going to be the ultimate outcome, number one. And then number two, the bigger outcome will actually be the traditional businesses that start to transform their own businesses and enable AI in their businesses and use Canadian employees here to create value for non-traditional tech businesses. But that is really where the end game has to be at this point.
Yeah, one thing I always think about, though, when I see these headlines that Mark McQueen always says, who you know very well, is that these things are just rebranded policies that were not adopted from the last iteration, and they just get reallocated under a different name and different sort of strategy. So we hope to see this as something revolutionary and new. And I hope we do look back and 5-10 years from now, it is one of the greatest things that we were able to show off to the Andreessens and the US and global, leaders of the world in AI. But speaking of AI, one of the best thought leaders in the market is always Mr. Jamie Dimon. And Jamie Dimon had his annual shareholder letter that came out the other day, and wow, was it a mic dropper. He is comparing AI to the printing press, the steam engine, electricity, computing, and the internet. Amazing. But what was more amazing, actually, besides all the ways that he thinks that AI and machine learning are going to reach areas as marketing and fraud and risk management, we all know those places that it's investing. It's the human capital that he is applying to this. They have 2,000 AI ML experts and data scientists and 400 use cases in production. And wait for it, a $15 billion IT budget.
Wow.
And still, it's still the early days for JP Morgan. So what do you think about this?
This is the same guy that basically said that you're a fraud artist if you're involved in cryptocurrency.
You're never going to let that go, are you?
This is the same guy?
You're never going to let that go.
Yeah, Jesus. It is kind of funny. Well, you know what?
We can't all bat 100.
Yeah, and we don't, it's a little bit like, Bill Gates and thinking cloud computing was going to be just an oversight. This is the difference. What I love about U.S. enterprises, even though he underestimated, and now, I mean, you could argue he's overestimating the impact, but you can't doubt the passion and the resources that they apply with such speed. There is a reason why companies like Jamie's and others, where they place a bet, they go in all in, they go in hard, and if they make a mistake, they correct hard. That's incredible. And, you do wonder why in Canada we're suffering a productivity issue, because we're not, there's an issue here of we're not investing the right levels of whether it's robotics or artificial intelligence to increase the productivity of our companies. And you see Jamie Dimon, who sometimes looked foolish, and now you look at him and go, wow, here's a guy that I'll draft behind now.
I would love to see any of the bank CEOs in Canada write a letter like this to shareholders.
Well, you've got a few of them that are really sharp on this, and engage in a conversation with Dave McKay on artificial intelligence, and I would put him up against any of the CEOs in the world on that topic. So the capabilities is here. The question really is, are you going to sit back on your heels, or are you going to really do with what Jamie has stated?
Maybe they're all thinking it. Jamie's just the one saying it out loud. The quiet part's out loud, but he does say,
yeah, and he's kind of known for saying a few things.
Just a few.
Yes,
he's saying we're exploring the use cases across a range of domains, right? We've got customer service, operations, employee productivity. We think it will reimagine entire business workflows, and we think that it's going to change the workforce composition, whatever that means. It means, but this is certainly a huge statement from one of the largest institutions in the world, a very strong influence on capital markets and technology investing. So I think it's something to definitely keep an eye on and exciting to see. Two other things I want to cover today, John. Our dear friend, Paddy Cosgrave, returns to Web Summit 6 months after stepping down. He was just put in the penalty box, I guess, for some of the comments he made over the Palestine-Israel war. What do you think about this? Do you think all of it was for show? Do you think he actually has any remorse for what he said? Or was he just trying to take a little bit of a breather behind the curtain and now coming back out in front, just ahead of, obviously, Collision this summer?
Yeah, well, first of all, both you and I weren't surprised, but he never actually ever left. He was still the majority shareholder. So, in name only, he was replaced. Again, look, I'm not going to wade into the Palestinian issues, but this guy has said a lot of things to a lot of different issues that if you're going to do that, first of all, be well educated about your topics. And not just on that topic, but I've seen him get in trouble on a lot of topics. Focus in on the business at hand. And if you don't want to do that, it's up to you, but suffer the ramifications. I do think, and I do know that a lot of folks don't, no matter what side of the fence that you sit on in that particular debate, do have a concern over his reputation and whether he's just not the right type of individual to associate with, just because he does tend to say very outlandish and ill-informed things. So we'll see. Let the customers speak and see what's going to happen at Collision in I guess in his final foray into Toronto.
It's interesting. Final foray. We'll see if it's actually the final foray, but
I think it will be the final foray. I think so.
We'll see. We'll have a last goodbye party, I guess, for everyone, not to cry over too much spilt milk, And last but not least, I don't know if you saw this headline, but Queen's University in Kingston, Ontario is implementing a new system, a first of its kind, to accept medical students into their lottery admissions process in order to increase diversity. Now, the headline would obviously raise eyebrows, if you will, on how they're just doing a lottery system for a medical school acceptance. But if you actually drill underneath it, it's not actually as inherent with bias as you would think. What are your thoughts on this? I mean, they basically say you still need to meet GPA, MCAT scores, and CASPER requirements to proceed to the interview stages. So all the people are of the highest caliber from a quantitative point of view. But they're saying that it's trying to encourage people to apply at all life stages and from all backgrounds. Therefore, it's not leaving anybody out who maybe doesn't come from the same socioeconomic situations as some of their top 1% acceptances. So what are your thoughts here? Do you think other schools will follow?
But first of all, I don't know what problem that they're really trying to solve.
Well, it says they're trying to increase diversity. I think that's the main thing.
Yes, but is it a real problem at Queen's? I'm not aware of that issue. One thing that I am aware at Queen's, with the exception of the engineering school and the commerce school, and without the generous donation of Stephen Smith, who's been unbelievable, Queen's is suffering a massive operating deficit. Last I checked, it was over $40 million, and there was a serious concern on whether the school is going to be financially stable to actually operate. I've been hearing rumors that the school is considering to privatize, which would be, you'd think, a death knell to the ability to possess the requisite resources to be a top-tier school in Canada. So my only comment is I don't know what is going on, but the school is struggling. And I don't know if this is a response to the school struggling or some other issue, but there's some serious issues going on, and I'm not exactly sure what to make of all of this.
It's interesting. You and I were at the dinner that was hosted with Vinod Khosla, and I asked the question if he thought universities would exist in the current status they are today, 5-10 years from now. And you know what? You bring up a great point. Universities are struggling, especially some of these semi-private, semi-government-backed ones. More and more students are just opting out. I mean, we're seeing it through our Ripple X fellowship program. More and more are putting their university education on pause because they want to get more hands-on real-world experience. And what they get out of university, maybe just the social and network effect they can get through other means.
Yeah, absolutely. And you look at the other side of the border in the United States. This has never been such a big issue. Now, it was obviously triggered around DEI as well, but through the Israeli-Palestinian or the Hamas war. But it's causing people to really reflect and really looking at the value proposition like I have never seen this in my career. So you're absolutely right. I am wondering whether folks are second guessing the value that universities are providing.
I mean, we saw the numbers for the early acceptance into Harvard. It was down, I think, like 26% or something, which is huge numbers. And so I think it's going to be a detriment to a lot of these institutions.
And I've heard that a number of the Canadian universities, the number of applications are down materially, and there is a concern. So time is going to tell to see how serious this is.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, thanks for joining us in the tank today, John.
All right. Thanks, Matt.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Tank Talks. We hope you found today's conversation as insightful as we did. If you're enjoying the show, we've got 3 quick things to ask of you. First, hit that subscribe button on your favorite podcast platform so you never miss an episode, whether that's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or YouTube. Next, follow us and stay up to date on upcoming episodes and behind-the-scenes content on social media with Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram. And lastly, share the love. If you found value in today's episode, share with a friend or colleague who'd benefit too. Your support helps us bring in more amazing guests and keeps the Tank Talks engine running. That's it for today. Until next time, keep disrupting and innovating.